Good evening and welcome to Club Book with Mary Kubica. My name is Stacy Hendren and I am the manager of the Northtown Library in Anoka County. I'm also the 2021 president of the Minnesota Library Association. I have the honor of hosting our featured guest and moderating questions tonight. Before I introduce tonight's guest properly, allow me a moment to tell you a bit more about the unique series that is bringing her to us. Club Book is a program of MELSA, the Metropolitan Library Service Agency, made possible through Minnesota's Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and coordinated by Library Strategies, part of the Friends of the St. Paul Public Library. Anoka County Library is the co-organizer of this evening's talk. Thanks also to partnering bookseller Red Balloon Bookshop. A purchase link to Local Woman Missing, which I cannot recommend highly enough, will be available in the comment section of the live stream feed. Have it shipped, pick it up at their lovely store in St. Paul, or have them deliver it personally to your door if you're in their area. I'm the third person to read my copy, and I'm passing it to my mom next. It's great, go get your own. One final housekeeping note, also in the comments, you'll see a survey link. Melsa would greatly appreciate hearing what you think of this club book program. It's quick and easy, and it helps ensure that we can continue to provide this type of high quality arts and culture programming into the future. I would like to say a special thank you to our state legislators who voted this spring to support library legacy funding, and to those of you that reached out to them for that reason. Without further ado, over the last decade, thriller novelist Mary Kubica has established herself as a mainstay of the genre. The Good Girl, her 2014 breakout about an amnesiac kidnapping victim, became an indie next list pick and put Kubica in contention for the Goodreads Choice Award. It is currently being adapted for television and won't be the only of Kubica's 7 books to make it to the screen. Netflix recently purchased the rights to The Other Misses, a modern whodunnit set in the tight-knit island community off the coast of Maine. Fellow mystery heavyweight and club book alum, Karin Slaughter called this bestseller altogether unpredictable, a descriptor that holds true for most of Kubica's work. Her latest, released in March, is Local Woman Missing. In this daringly plotted, emotionally eviscerating psychological thriller, says Publisher Weekly, several women vanish without a trace from a seemingly safe and ordinary community. When one of these victims returns 10 years later, the shocking truth upends even more lives. So after a short presentation by our guest and some initial questions from me, we'll have time for audience Q&A. Simply drop your questions in the comments thread here on Facebook, and our tech manager will route them to me. If you prefer to ask a question a little bit more anonymously, you can also send a private message to Club Book here on Facebook, or send an email to clubbookmn@gmail.com. So thank you for joining us tonight, Mary. I'll hand it off to you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here tonight. Thankfully, all the Facebook issues have been resolved, so we can have this tonight. And I'm just so excited to be able to chat with you about my latest thriller, Local Woman Missing. And I guess just to start, I thought I would tell you a little bit about the book, and then we can have our conversation. But Local Woman Missing is the 7th psychological suspense. And this one, it takes place in 2 different time periods, now in the present time, and then 11 years before. And the story is about 2 women and a little girl, 3 people who go missing from a quiet, seemingly safe suburban community from the suburbs of Chicago, which is where I'm from. And there's an investigation into their disappearances. Everybody wants to know if these are isolated incidents or if these disappearances are connected. And the police do uncover some clues, but ultimately the cases go cold until 11 years later, when the little girl, who was just 6 at the time, she's now 17, returns, and everybody wants to know where she's been all this time, and where are the others. And so this book it was a really fun one for me to write. Writing is a weird thing in that it's, some books cooperate when you write them and some totally don't. And so it's not one of those things that necessarily gets easier the more you write. But Local Woman Missing was just like the best behaved child. It just, it flowed, and I think like the character spoke to me really quickly, and I just got them. And so it made it just such a wonderful experience to write this book. And so I'm so excited to chat about it, and all of you out there joining us tonight. Thank you for being here. And if you've had a chance to read it, thank you so much.
Wonderful. If you haven't read it yet, I highly recommend it, and I'm looking forward to our discussion as well. So I'm going to digress with a non-related but related question first. I was wondering if you tell us a little bit about your work in the animal shelter. So I felt so much empathy for the dog at the beginning of the story, for Wyatt, the family's dog, and all the dogs that Kate works with at the clinic. So just share a little bit about that, please.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a huge animal lover. I grew up with animals, and then I started working at a shelter near my house. It's been, I think, about 11 years now that I've been there, and I love it. For me, it's such a rewarding feeling to go into the shelter and work with these animals. And I mean, there's nothing like animals. There's no judgment. They love you on your worst day. I just love that. Just that feeling of always being welcome. And so I love to support them and give back and do what I can to help them. Things have been a little different during COVID, in that for most of it, the shelter was actually closed to volunteers, just open to a few staff members. So I've actually used that time I've always fostered a little bit here and there, but I've used, the last 18 months to really ramp up my fostering. And so we have 5 foster kittens right now that are with us. And so we've gone through over the last, I think it's like 30 to 40 cats and kittens that we fostered over the last year and a half. So I've loved doing that. I've loved being able to be a part of that shelter community and to help, even when I can't get into the shelter. And so I brought, Wyatt and the other animals. There's a cat named Zeus. And I feel like most of my books, there's some animal that makes an appearance, because I love them, for one. But I also feel like I really want my characters to be like everyday, ordinary people, just like you and me. So, a lot of us have pets. They're a part of our family. They're a part of our lives. And so it would feel wrong to just completely exclude them from my book. So I think that, when things happen, like in this book, Wyatt belongs to Meredith and Delilah, who go missing. And, I think that impacts, the animals too. And so I kind of mentioned that. And one of my characters is a vet at a clinic. And so, as you get to know her as a character, you see the experiences that she has as a vet. And actually, I have a very good friend who is a vet. And so, I was able to kind of, some of Kate's stories and some of the things that she says about being a vet, I was able to kind of draw from some conversations that I've had with my own friends, and just, some of those things that she experiences in her line of work. And so I think it makes the characters that much more authentic by adding the animals in there.
Oh, wow. Well, I totally agree. Wonderful. Thanks for sharing more about that.
Yeah.
So I'd like to hear a little bit more about the inspiration for Local Woman Missing.
Yeah. So I always, when I start my books, it's a tiny, not developed idea, and I usually don't know how it's going to grow and develop when I write. But with Local Woman Missing, I think the thing that intrigues me the most is that so often when we hear about missing people on the news, the story ends. If they return, the story ends, I feel like, with their return. We don't hear what happens next and what it's like for some person who's been living in captivity for however long, what it's like when they return home to their families, and that like deep-seated fear that must stay with them, and a complete inability to trust people, and just things like that. And so that was where this story started for me was that I wanted to sort of explore life after, this period of time in captivity. And so I didn't know, how the rest of the story was going to unfold, or what it was actually that put this character into captivity. I didn't really know what came before that, but I knew that. And so the spoiler free, but the book starts with a chapter from a character's point of view who is trying to escape captivity. And so that was where I started writing and just kind of settled into her story. And from there started, the wheels started spinning in my head, and I started coming up with, some more ideas for where the story was going to go.
Oh, wow. And so Delilah is the one at the beginning who's held captive. Is any part of that based on a true story? Because it really reads like it.
Thank you. It's actually not. I mean, I think it could be. So, I feel like it's something that you could so easily see on the news or watch, a true crime documentary about. I feel like it's not based on any person that I know or any story that I've heard of, but it's also so reminiscent of so many things that we do hear, sadly, on the news. But her voice, she just spoke to me, and I feel like she has a pretty unique voice. And even before I started writing the book, I could just kind of hear her in my head. And that was one of those things that made me connect so much to her. And I feel like when I have a closer connection to my characters, that hopefully I'm able to tell their story even better, a little bit more emotionally and powerfully, because I feel like I have that connection with them. And with her, it was just so strong. So yeah, so that's kind of where she came from.
Cool. Can you tell us, well, not cool, super sad, but yes, it came across really well. Oh, can you tell a little bit? Delilah's one of the narrators, but you have several narrators. Can you talk a little bit about your choice of whose internal voice is heard and whose isn't, both in the before and the now?
Yeah, absolutely. That's always, once I get that first idea for a book, the next thing that I think about, or, the question I ask myself is, who is going to tell this story? And all of my books, I write from multiple narrators' points of view. I don't think I could write a book from just one point of view, because I don't know, I just like the dimension that it adds to the story by having all these narrators. And I think that in a mystery story too, you can kind of those narrators can play off each other, and their storylines can connect or not connect, which makes you wonder why. And so I love that. So, I knew that I was going to need more than Delilah to tell this story. And so for this book, we hear from 4 different narrators. So we hear from Delilah, who's the little girl who at 17 years old returns home. We hear from her. And then we hear from her mother, who is also one of the women who goes missing. So we hear from her in the past. And her name is Meredith. And Meredith is a doula, which I'm not a plotter. So it's one of those things that, when I introduced her as being a doula, and I also know a doula, so I was pulling some inspiration for my life here too. But she was missing, and her husband wasn't immediately panicking. And so I wanted a reason why he might not immediately panic. And I was thinking of my friend who is a doula, and how, there are many times that she's called into a birth in the middle of the night, or, during the day, and she's gone for 24 hours and hard to get in touch with and things like that. And so I thought, well, maybe if Meredith was a doula, it would explain why she might be unreachable for this period of time. And, everybody, they're getting nervous, but they're not on like super high alert. And so I made her a doula. But then I had no idea when I made her a doula that it actually ends up being a really big part of this story. There are so many other characters and mysteries that really revolve around her being a doula. So that was kind of something that I didn't anticipate when I made her a doula. But so Meredith, she's a mother. We hear from her in the before. She's trying her hardest to be a mother, but she's a very busy working woman. And then some other things beyond her control start happening that just kind of really hopefully, ramp up that mystery there. And then we hear from Kate, who lives right next door to this family. And so Kate is really instrumental when Delilah and Meredith both go missing. Kate really kind of, she wants to find them. She helps organize search parties, and she knows Meredith, they're close friends. So we hear from her a lot that way, and she's missing her friend. She wants to find her friend. So we hear from Kate. And then in the present, we hear from Leo. So Leo is, he's Delilah's little brother. So when we hear from him in the present, he's a 15-year-old boy. And I don't know, I loved all of these narrators. I feel like I've been asked many times to pick a favorite, and I think every time I give a different favorite because I just like them all so much. But Leo is, he was a fun one to write. I wrote his from the second person point of view, which I've never done before, but I wanted to kind of differentiate his voice from the others. And so I thought, I'm going to try that and just see what it's like. And I ended up loving it. His whole story is basically he's talking to Delilah. And he's got a lot of feelings about this, or about her return when the story begins. He's pretty resentful, actually, because his whole life has sort of been on hold for her. He's always played second fiddle to her because everybody wants to know where she is and they're grieving her loss and things like that. So when she comes back, he's kind of mad because he's sort of finally moved on and it wasn't all about her anymore, but now it is. And, I have teenagers myself, so I was able to really relate to, what it's like to be a teenager and what do teenagers talk like and act like and things like that. And he grows so much throughout the pages of the book. I feel like by the end of it, I was just like so proud of the boy that he became. So those are the four narrators that you hear from in this book. And like I said, I just had such a deep connection to all of them. And as a writer, that's kind of always my goal, is I know that the writing is going to get so much more easy and fluid as soon as I can really connect with my characters.
Oh, wow. We had a couple questions from the viewers kind of on this topic. So one was, how did you decide to have Delilah in captivity for 11 years? Was there any meaning to that length of time?
I wanted it to be enough time that she didn't really have a lot of memories of her childhood, because I just, I wanted to uncover those things from some of the other characters versus Delilah coming back and just telling us what happens. That was I think my primary reason for having this time span. I think too, it's kind of neat because we see Delilah, in Meredith's before chapters when she's a 6-year-old girl and she's going to kindergarten and, she's having conflicts with her little classmates and things like that. And then all of a sudden she's 17 and she's been through this horrific experience and she's very much changed. So I liked that too. I like to be able to create or present, this same character, but in just two very different points of her life.
Oh, wow. Yes. I'd like to share a quote from the book. There ain't no light coming into this place where they keep guessing me. We're underground. There's no windows here, and that crack of light that should be at the bottom of the door ain't there. The man and the lady that live upstairs are keeping the light all to themselves, sharing none with Gus and me. So one of the themes I noticed was that play with dark and light, running in the dark, the light of the headlights, the darkness in the basement, and kind of the dark and light side of the characters. And then also that in-between shade where it's not quite dark enough. Will you talk a little bit about that theme and your use?
Yeah, theme is one of those things that I think it must come from the subconscious, maybe because I never think about it in advance. I don't intentionally think about themes or, try to put themes into the book. And it's one of those things when it's all said and done, usually, and I've had a little bit of distance from the book and I kind of reread it, that those things start to pop out to me. And it seems like with all the books, there's something that I've done, but not intentionally. And I think with this, it's more like the greenness. I think that jumps out to me versus the polar opposites of light and dark. It is that space in between. And I think, with so many situations and so many people, the different characters, it's not all good or bad, there's a lot of in between with these people. And so, we have, characters who are trying so hard to be, the very best, but maybe they have something in their past that's haunting them, or, and I think that is one of those things that I just love to explore. So there is so much lightness and darkness kind of brought into this book. And I think in part of that too is like, Delilah's been through this horrible experience, but there's kind of hope at the end of it. And I think that's something that I do kind of keep trying to go back to, that for many of these characters, even though they do experience horrible things through the book, there's some some sort of positive outcome, or something good has become of it, or will become of it, or there's some sort of happiness at the end of it. So I think that that's kind of where I come from. The book, it's dark, but I feel like it also ends on like maybe a bit of a hopeful tone too, that things might be better in the future, or from this point on. So that, I think, is one of the things that I like to leave my readers with, to kind of question that gray area within people, and just kind of the mysteries that are unfolding, and also, to think that there might be hope after this.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Oh, well, hopeful ending, yes. Though this is the spoiler free. I think we can share that.
Yes.
So Josh is Meredith's husband, and early in the story, Josh is out searching for the missing family after the police have stopped. And midway through the book, one of the characters says, "It's time we stop being amateur sleuths and let the police handle this. We're in over our heads." Can you talk a little bit about that balance between what we must do and discover ourselves and what we must hand over to the police, but in terms of what makes a great thriller?
Yeah, for sure. So obviously, we have missing women, a missing girl, missing people. And the characters do call the police right away, because I think as a reader, one of those things that really bothers me is when something horrible is happening, and it takes the characters days to involve the police. And so they do call the police right away when they realize, this is something is happening here. But as a writer, I have written a detective narrator before in The Good Girl, but I shy away from it though, because I'm not a detective. I don't know everything about being a detective. And it's not that I do plenty of research for my books, but sometimes I also just want to be able to like sink into my characters and experience them, on a more just kind of organic level versus constant research. And am I doing this right? And, all of that. So the police were necessary, but I also want these characters to be able to uncover so many things for themselves, maybe secrets that people are hiding, and, just things like that. So I feel like my books definitely fall in that domestic suspense genre. So that's why I really I want my characters that's not to say I'll never write another detective, but generally I want my characters to just be everyday, ordinary people that get put in these crazy situations and try and figure them out, and I think all of us, if someone was to go missing on our street, I think all of us many of us would turn into amateur sleuths and try and figure out, what happens. So I feel like I kind of start with there and just try to make it as, like just human, on a very like human level, what's that like, and what are they uncovering? But I do definitely have the police there because I think they're necessary just for, plausibility.
I know when I read that, we're in over our heads. It's like, yes, you are. It's just great how it all played out.
Thank you.
So, in your last two books, I couldn't miss the motive that people we think we know, particularly neighbors, are all different behind closed doors. Do you think this holds true in real life?
I do. I think, here in my own neighborhood, I have a lot of close friends, but there are a lot of people that I just, wave and drive by, and I don't really know them, and so people like that, you don't know what goes on behind closed doors. And I think though that even people that you do know pretty well, you can only know about a person as much as they're willing to share with you. So, so I think that there's always that fine line between how well do you really know this person and what secrets are they keeping. And I know, I feel like in my own life, my own neighborhood, there are people that you find out something, whether it's about their past, their present, that is really surprising. Just, you didn't know that. And, maybe there just wasn't the opportunity to know that, or maybe it's something that someone's been keeping from you. But it always just makes me wonder, the things that you don't know. And I feel like neighborhoods they're just very intimate places. You pass these people every day on the street, you live, however many feet away from them. And, so they are very intimate places. You trust each other. When you see each other, you let your kids outside, and so I think that all that, it just leads to, the possibility that something could happen, that somebody may not be who you think they are. And so that is definitely a theme that I love to explore, again, because I feel like I'm so into that domestic suspense genre, that neighborhoods and, communities and like tight knit communities, I feel like really go hand in hand with that.
Oh, wow. Makes me want to get to know my neighbors a little bit better. So, so you mentioned this a little bit. Will you tell us more about your research process, specifically for this book, but also in general?
Yeah, for sure. So with this book, it ended up, most of my research was really on doulas, I have to say. And again, going back to earlier, I didn't really even know that it was that Meredith being a doula was going to be such a big part of this book, but it is. And so I did a lot of research into being a doula, but also, some things that go wrong during childbirth that that maybe you wouldn't think about. And so the more I uncovered, and a lot of it is online research, reading blogs, reading medical websites, things like that. The more I uncovered, it kind of, I always fall down these like rabbit holes of research, and I learned so many things that I never thought I needed to know. And, maybe 50% of it, if that, makes it into a book, but I feel like all that knowledge just, it just helps make the characters that much more real. But yeah, so I learned so much about being a doula and what goes wrong. And then I was able to kind of use some of that to my advantage to kind of create some additional mysteries within this story. So I feel like that was where the bulk of my research was. And again, having a friend who's a doula was great, because I wrote the book, and then, I sent her a draft and said, can you let me know if there's any glaring errors, from a doula point of view here. So that was really, really helpful. I tend to do most of my research online, but I do reach out to a number of people. My last book, The Other Misses, touched on some mental health issues. So after I had finished writing that, I did ask a therapist to read the book, and same as with my doula friends, just, was there any point where I was being insensitive, or, just anything that that might hurt somebody inadvertently, so that was really helpful. Or just, was I making any mistakes in the language I was using and things like that. So that was really helpful. So I do research. There always seems to be a couple topics that I feel like I need to research pretty heavily with each book, but also so much of it, I mean, this is I get to make a lot of stuff up too. I've always thought it would be really fun to write historical fiction, and then I think about all the research and I get really intimidated.
Oh, wow. Well, you tie in all those things you learned so well.
Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you.
so one person is asking, are you a fan of kind of the true crime content, podcast, TV? And where do you draw if not there, where do you draw these great ideas?
I am a fan. I do more. I've listened to the true crime podcast. I will forever be a huge fan of Serial. That was the one that got me started, and I just loved it.
So great.
I was driving in the car listening to it, and I didn't ever want to get out of my car. I just wanted to keep driving. But I did, over COVID especially, I think that we watched like every true crime documentary that Netflix had to offer. And so definitely I'm a big fan. And I do pull inspiration from there for sure. And, I read the news, I watch the news. So I feel like, whenever I'm going to watch something on TV, it's always something mystery based, I feel like. And so I feel like I'm always drawing inspiration from these things. And usually when I start a book, I start with someone is missing, someone has been murdered. I kind of start from there with that crime that whatever, has happened. And then I start to build the characters in the story from that point.
Mhm. So, that brings me, so you're building from that point. Can you tell us a little bit about how your writing process? Like, are you a plotter, or how does that work?
I am not a plotter. I am, I call myself usually a pantser, which is, someone who flies by the seat of their pants, but Someone recently described it as a gardener, which I like. It's a better imagery, I think, of, you have a seed and you plant your seed and you water it, but you're not really sure what is going to grow or if something is going to grow, because sometimes that does happen. But, so I start with this idea, in this case, it was Delilah escaping captivity. And I had no idea. Well, why was she in captivity, and I just started writing, and initially it was just going to be Delilah and her mother who were missing. And so I started writing that. And then all of a sudden I thought to myself, well, wouldn't it be, even more powerful if somebody else was missing? There was already someone had gone missing in the neighborhood. So then it just kind of ups the ante there, just, really kind of raises the stakes. And so I just kind of do it like that, and I'm writing, which it's something that I love about it. On any given day that I get up and get on the computer and start writing, I really have no idea what's going to happen. And there are times that I write myself into a corner and I have to delete a lot of things, and get back on a better road. But I just love it. I love just the kind of organic way that the story and the characters kind of unfold. And, the one thing that I do with my writing, though, going back to the 4 different narrators, is that I actually write one of them at a time. So instead of writing the book like you would read it, I started with Delilah and I wrote her story, and hers is like the first 40 pages of the book. But then I moved on to Kate and I wrote Kate's whole story from beginning to end. And then I set
Wow.
Kate aside. And then I wrote all of Meredith and I set her aside, and I wrote all of Leo. And then I take it to like the FedEx store and I print it out and I have my like 4 stacks of paper and I start working the book together. So I love doing it that way. I've always done it that way. I got the idea with The Good Girl, my first book, and it worked. So I've just kept doing it. And I like it because, like with this book, for example, actually none of the storylines are linear in time. So there's really no need to go back and forth. They're all just a little bit off of each other. So this way I can just focus on that time, what is happening at that time, and be true to that narrator. I can be in his or her head, and I'm not worried about mixing up, Kate and Meredith's voices, because I'm just focusing on one of them at a time. And so I just feel like when I describe it, I feel like it always sounds very complicated, but when I'm writing it, I think it makes the process much less complicated.
Oh, wow. So, will you tell us a little bit more about how you got into publishing and got an agent? So, did you have difficulty bringing The Good Girl to the market, or did your publisher just know this was a good thing when they saw it?
So I used to be a high school history teacher, and I taught for many years, and I always loved to write, though. I loved to write since I was 10, 11, something like that. But I was always very shy about my writing. So, writing was something that was for me, but I never thought that one day I would want to be an author. So I wrote throughout my childhood, through college, while I was teaching. And then when my daughter was born, that was back in 2005, I left my career temporarily, I thought, to raise my family. And it was like weeks after my daughter was born that I started writing what's become The Good Girl. I don't know now how I possibly was writing a book with an infant at home, but somehow I did that. And I started writing The Good Girl. And when I started, it was just like, anything that I had written before. And I don't know, I liked it, but it was, I don't know, I didn't know that this one was going to be any different. And everything I'd written before was like unfinished. I'd write it and then lose interest and move on to something new. But with The Good Girl, just something clicked. And I think it had to do with those characters. I connected to the characters really quickly, and the storyline. And I wanted to write it all the time. When I wasn't writing, I was thinking about writing. And I had a little one at home. So I was just, any spare minute that I possibly had, I was on the laptop. And at some point writing that book, I finally felt the urge to want to do something with this book and see if I could get it published. And I wrote the whole book in privacy. I didn't tell anybody that I was working on it. It took me 5 years to write it. And then when I finished, I knew I wanted to do something with it, but I didn't know what. I didn't know how to go about getting a book published. I hadn't studied creative writing in college because I had, studied to be a teacher. And I didn't have any author friends. I had never belonged to a writer's group because I'd always shy about my writing. I didn't want to share anything. So I didn't know what to do. So I got on the internet, as we do, and, Googled what do I do, with this book I just wrote. And there's a book that lists literary agents called The Writer's Market. And so I went and I got a copy of that, and I went through and I highlighted like every single agent that represented something that I thought I had written. I wasn't even sure what genre this was or anything. And so I wrote up a query letter, and I started sending that query letter. And some of the agents want a couple chapters, some just want the query letter, and then if they're interested, they'll ask for more. So I started sending it out. Again, nobody had ever read this book besides me. Nobody had proofread it, nothing. I started sending it out to a lot of agents. I didn't keep track, but it was like upwards of 100. And so I sent it out, and, within like minutes of hitting send on the emails, the rejections started coming in. And there were 3 agents that asked to read the whole manuscript, but ultimately every single agent turned it down. So I thought, that book will never be published. And I moved on. I started writing something else. I don't know what it is or where it is, but it was, it was nothing that grabbed me like The Good Girl. I felt like that was the best I could do at that point in my career, at least. So 2 years passed, actually, after that last rejection. 2 years passed. And then one of these agents reached back out to me and asked if the book was, if it was still available, if I'd sold it. So it just so happens that she was brand new to this literary agency the first time I queried them. She was right out of college, and she'd been given the task of going through their slush pile and seeing if there was anything in there worth pursuing. And she read The Good Girl. She loved The Good Girl. She wanted to pursue it, but she couldn't get the rest of her team on board. And she was working as an assistant for another agent, so she just didn't have the authority to take it on herself. So she had to pass on her team's behalf. And within those next 2 years, she was promoted to a literary agent. And so she was in a position to represent her own clients. And she remembered The Good Girl for 2 years. And so she sought me out. And there was this moment of what is happening when I got her email. So it was a dream come true. And I just think, it was hard going through all that rejection, but in retrospect, it was just the best way it could happen. And I knew that she was as passionate about that book as I was. So she and I worked together for a few months, cleans it up a little bit, finally got proofread. And then, so that was back in, I think, 2012. And then by the end of that year, she was sending it out to publishers. And I did get 2 offers from editors on the same day. And I was able to get on the phone with both of them, and they were absolutely lovely. I would have been very lucky to work with either of them. But the woman I went with, who's still my editor today, she, well, for one, she kind of scared me. I knew she was tough, but I knew she was going to push me to make that book the best that it could be. But she had also offered me a 2-book deal. And, at that point, I only had 1 book, but I knew that this was like a once in a lifetime opportunity to take this 1 book and just make a career with it. So I did. So I went with her, and I've been with the same publisher ever since. And they just, I've learned so much about publishing and marketing a book over the last many years. And I know that it just means everything if you have a publisher who is 110% behind you and just supporting and marketing that book, because there are so many phenomenal books out there, that come out every single Tuesday. And so, just to get that visibility, it's hard. And so to have a publisher that really supports you is everything. So, they were the ones that really they took over with The Good Girl, and they did a phenomenal job of marketing and promoting it.
Wow. So now that you have a half dozen books under your belt, have you found that it gets easier to think of ideas, commit ideas to words, and to see your books published?
It's no. It's each book is just like its own thing, and I think that it's how much I connect to the storyline and the characters that seems to be the best answer I have as to why some seem easier and some seem more difficult. If I am just getting the storyline and I can kind of see 3 chapters ahead and all of that, and I'm really connecting with the characters, it's great. The writing just flows. But then there are times where it feels like work. It feels like more of a job to write, because those characters just aren't talking to me. And, there's more deleting than writing going on. And so that happens. And, I think that I've come to just accept that happens. Right now I am writing something incredibly slowly. COVID has not helped. But I'm finally starting to find my traction again. And, and so this one's not being as cooperative as Local Woman Missing, but I keep telling myself it's okay because the next one's probably going to be super cooperative.
Oh, wow. So, one of our pre-readers was wondering, do you play any role in the production of your audiobooks or the voice talent?
So I definitely don't do any voices, but but I get to select the narrators, which I think is so cool. And over the last maybe 5 years, I've really gotten into audiobooks myself. So I know the importance of a really good narrator.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there are some, and I will go listen to books that maybe I wasn't even familiar with just because some narrator I love is narrating it. So, I mean, it's amazing what they do. But so usually what happens when the book is done and they're ready to start recording the audiobook, they'll send me a couple samples, a couple clips of narrators that they're looking at. So they'll send me maybe 3 for each of the different narrators we need, and I can listen to them and rank them in order. If I don't like any of them, then I can let my publisher know that too. It's just really neat, when you've written a book for a year or whatever, and you have this character's voice in your head, and then you listen to these samples of audiobook narrators, and I feel like I always know, there'll be some that I'm just like, no, that's not right. But then when I hear it, I know it. And the audiobook for Local and Missing, these narrators just did a phenomenal job. And I was just thrilled because, again, as a listener, I know the value of a good narrator. So as a writer, I'm just so grateful.
Oh, wow. So exciting to hear that you get to be part of that and know that voice is reflective of what you want.
For
Oh,
sure.
wow. So, since you are so high profile now, have you learned or heard about any famous fans who are tickled and enjoy your work?
Every now and then I do see, like, on social media, on Twitter or Instagram, I will see, some celebrity post a picture or something with my books. Years ago, Kristen Ritter, the actress, she wrote a book called Bonfire. It's been a few years. I can't remember what year exactly that came out, but she had sent it to me and asked if I would, read an arc and maybe supply a blurb. And I was like, of course. I was so honored, but she's just lovely. And every now and then she'll send me like a DM on Twitter or something. And it's kind of surreal. My teenage daughter went crazy when she heard that. But so it's nice. And like the couple, it doesn't have, I haven't connected with many, but Emmy Rossum's another one that every now and then will send a DM or something on Twitter and just say something really kind about one of my books. But it's surreal, but also then I realized they're just people, and they're just readers. And so, but it's so amazing, really, to know that somebody out there in Hollywood is reading it.
Oh, well, then you got to be a beta reader for someone famous. Who do you lean on for your beta readers?
Yeah. So when I'm writing, when I'm drafting, I don't let anybody read the books. I don't talk to anybody about the books. I'm like, I don't know. I think that I have to get that draft out myself, because as soon as I open my mouth and start saying something, everybody has something to say and they mean the best. But then I feel like it starts to get complicated. I feel like there's too many ideas then, and something about it doesn't feel like it's mine anymore.
Oh,
So
wow.
when I'm writing that first draft, I don't share it with anybody. I usually have to get a proposal approved from my editor, and that's just, the basics and maybe a chapter. But after that, she doesn't ask me again until the deadline is approaching. But then when it's done, so when I have a solid draft done, I will have my editor and my agent, I'll send it to both of them. And I usually at that point, I'll let my husband read it too. And then, we'll go through a number of rounds of revisions. And then I have to say, with Local and Missing and the other misses, I did something I've never done before, and I'm actually in a book club myself. And so when they were all done with revisions, but still at a point where more revisions could be made, I asked my own book club members to read them, just because I think that getting feedback from a reader would just be so valuable. Usually it's literally just my husband, my agent, my editor, myself. So, you know as well as I do that books are just so subjective. And so I felt at that point, like, just the more feedback that I could get, the better. And I thought that it was just so helpful. If some of those little breadcrumb clues were just a little too obvious, or things like that, that if readers were picking up on things a lot earlier than I wanted to, then I would pull back, and things like that. And so it was so helpful with, pacing and laying those clues. And so I love doing that, just getting like these other 10 people's opinions, and they're everyday readers. They're not somebody that's in the publishing industry, but they're readers. So I love that. So that's really all that I get to read it, and then it's done.
Oh, wow. So if these projects and manuscripts are being cooperative, how long does it take you to do a first draft?
Yeah. So usually I'll get that first draft done, I would say, in about 7 to 8 months. And then my editor and I will go through it for the next couple months. And that's always, it's such a good process. It's a good process because she has incredible feedback, for one. But the second thing is that when she has the manuscript, say she has it for a month, that's a month that I'm not looking at it. I'm probably thinking about it, but I'm not working on it, and
Mhm.
when she sends it back then to me, I can see it with totally, clear eyes, and I have such a different perspective. So that's always, when the manuscript's here on my computer, it's impossible to walk away from it. Even if I'm at a really rough patch and I think I'm going to take 2 days off, I never do. I go right back to it. So when she has it, that's always so valuable. So I've slowed down a little bit, but I had been publishing about a book a year. And then the last couple was more like 15 to 18 months, I think.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Much different than that 5 years Girl Gone. So many of your books are based in Chicagoland. Other than living there, why do you like basing books in that area?
Yeah. Well, I like it. I like it mostly because I live here, and it's home. It's so easy to write about it because I know it. I don't have to do research. I don't have to think too much. I don't have to wonder what's the weather like in Chicago in May or whatever. I know. So that's primarily the reason. But I also love it because there's a lot, I could write a number of books, and they can all be different. I can write in the suburbs as Local and Missing a Set, or I could write in the city, which, like Don't You Cry and When the Lights Go Out are set in. And even within the city, there are so many different neighborhoods that I can set it in different neighborhoods and just kind of bring a different feel to the book too. So I like that there is just so much diversity and location right here within this one, Chicagoland area.
Oh, wow. Great. So this question comes from a viewer. What reads would you recommend to someone who's a big fan of AJ Flynn and Finn and Gillian Flynn, and an even bigger fan of Mary Kubica, but has burned through all three backlists? This person's on bed rest and at the top of their game in terms of speed reading.
Okay. Oh, good. I wish I could learn. I want to speed read. Um, okay. So I think some of my favorites of all time in this genre, Jennifer Hillier's Little Secrets. That one came out last year, I want to say, and it's just so phenomenal. The book starts with a little boy getting abducted, but then it takes this like complete turn into something that you don't anticipate, in the opening chapters of the book. And it's so dark, but so good, and just so smartly plotted. That one I can't say enough good things about. Before I Go to Sleep by S.J. Watson is another one that's been out for a number of years. And there's a movie with Nicole Kidman too. That's another one that is just so smart. That's the book that I feel like, when I get asked, what book do you wish you would have written? And that's one. It's brilliant, I think. And the twist just absolutely blew my mind. So those two. And then Alice Feeney just came out with her fourth book. It's called Rock, Paper, Scissors. That one came out early September. I think it's really pretty new. I've loved all of Alice's books, but this one, Rock, Paper, Scissors, just, I mean, she just hit it out of the ballpark with this one. So
Oh,
I
wow.
highly recommend that one. That's another one that when I got to the twist and just the way that, all the pieces she had laid before that came together, I was completely shocked. So those are some. Megan Abbott's book. I'm the book about the gymnast, and I'm forgetting the title. You Will Know Me, I think it's called. That's another one that I absolutely loved. And Jillian McMillan's What She Knew. That's another one about a little boy getting abducted. But that it's so good and it's so emotional and raw. That's another one that I highly recommend. So
Oh, wow. Well, thank you for those.
yeah,
So,
absolutely.
so you talk about the twist, and as Karin Slaughter said in the intro, your books are altogether unpredictable, which I am a talented predictor, and I completely agree. I had no idea. What are some of the ways that you as a writer don't fall into that predictability or formulaic trap?
Yeah. I really think that because I don't plot and I usually don't know the twist, I think that actually helps because I feel like when I think of the twist, when I finally get to that point, I've laid the groundwork and I've made these characters and I'm starting to learn things about them and I finally land on that twist. If I kind of have that, if it surprises me, then I feel like the reader will genuinely be surprised. And if I feel kind of, like lukewarm about it, then it's not good. I feel like the reader won't be surprised. No matter what I do, I don't know that I can get them to be surprised. So, I think I base it so much on my own reaction. It's just kind of a gut feeling. But I think, for it to be I think that there's, I don't know, like it needs to be obviously not the same twists that have been done before. I think you gotta just really think higher and it's getting harder, I have to say. I mean, this is a really popular genre with so many incredible authors writing incredible twists. So, you gotta just kind of continue to think and I don't know, I think I just base it so much on how I feel and does it really surprise me? And do I feel in my gut like this is right and that it's unique, that it's something that hasn't been done before, but simultaneously like plausible. I think that there's something really to be said about things that are implausible, just not sitting well with readers, and that's not to say, I mean, you can kind of make anything happen, but you just have to lay the groundwork for why or how this is happening.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Mm. I was just thinking of like the groundwork in your book for things that it's like, oh, it could be this, but but maybe, but not. So wonderful, wonderful. So are you permitted to share anything about the other misses as it will come to life on Netflix?
Yeah, so what I know is so Netflix optioned it and they want to make a movie with it. And so they have a screenplay. A man named Jack Thorne wrote the screenplay, which was so just amazing. If you Google him, he's done so many incredible things. He's just kind of a star. So I was so excited when he got attached to it. And so they have a producer, they have the executive producer, they're working on a director right now. So they're looking for a director. And then the next thing that they'll do is cast it. And I will say that I did get to read the screenplay and I can't say anything other than I really, truly loved it. And I
Oh,
just
good.
thought that Jack Thorne did just a phenomenal, phenomenal job. So I don't have a timeline for that yet, but I'm hoping that there will be news to share soon.
Ooh, can't wait. Looking forward to that one.
Thank you.
So, couple questions. What books or authors inspire you as a writer?
Yeah. I feel like they all in some way do. I every time I read, ever since I've become an author, I read much differently than I did before. And, I'm just looking for different things and I'm questioning things like, how did the author surprise me like that? And I know I read or I listened to Alex Michaelides The Silent Patient not that long ago. And I mean, I was shocked. I try so hard, of course, to guess the twist, but I was so shocked, and so then right away I thought, I've got to get the physical book. I've got to study this thing. I want to know how to do this. So I think that I am always paying attention to, how are authors doing twists and what, like when I come across a character that I really connect with, why am I connecting with this character? Why do I care so much about this character? And just things like that. I feel like when I read for pleasure, but I'm also sort of studying, and it's just everything. There isn't a particular book or character that jumps out to me, but I will say, Bird by Bird by Annie Lamott it's such an inspirational book for a writer. There's some how-to in there. If there's aspiring writers with us or writers with us right now, there's some how-to in there. But I think that just sort of that emotional journey that a writer goes through, that's one that I just connected so much with that. So if you're looking for, if anybody's looking for books on writing, that was one that I absolutely loved.
Oh, wow. What is one thing you never or rarely get asked, but love to share or speak about?
Oh, that's such a good question, but I don't know that I have a good answer. I don't know. I feel like, gosh, I don't know. I feel like I get asked most of the questions. I already shared kind of my how did I get into publishing. That's always my favorite story to share, just because I think that again, when I do events like this, there are so many aspiring writers in the audience, and so I think that that's one that's always just so good to share, that people need to hear that. So many authors. I mean, I feel like it's a story. Some version of that I've heard from so many authors that I've met, but that it can take years to find an agent, and that there's a lot of rejection really precedes those offers. And so I think that that's always one that when I don't get asked, I always feel like people need to hear it.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Do you keep in touch with any of your colleagues or students from your teaching days? And
Well,
have you ever felt the urge to write something more in the vein of historical, even with research?
I do keep in touch with some. It's more the teachers than the students. I taught a little bit in the suburbs of Chicago, but then for a number of years, we were actually living out in Omaha. My husband was relocated for work, and so now I'm back in Chicago. So there's some distance there, but I do, the historical fiction, that I think about it all the time. Just, I love reading historical fiction. When I'm not reading suspense, it's definitely my go-to genre. But the research intimidates me, and I feel like right now, at least while I'm under contract and having deadlines, that I don't know that I could pull it off. I think I would need to really like allow myself 2+ years to do the research and then write the book. So maybe one day.
Oh, wow. So the librarian in me does have to ask, how have libraries influenced you as a writer or a reader?
Oh my gosh, so much. I mean, some of my early fondest memories are of going to the library with my mom. I would go and I would just check out as many books as I could possibly carry. And I always felt like, am I really allowed to take all these books home? Okay. And I mean, I loved it. I was just like a really curious kid. And, one day I would like love buildings, and the next day I want to learn about insects. And it was like I could just go and get all these books, and it was just my favorite thing to do. And, so I mean, I think that love of libraries started at an early age, just having access to all these books and all this knowledge. And it just continued once I had kids. We would go to the library like weekly and fill up a giant tote bag with books. And we had, like a basket for the library books. And the kids and I would sit on the couch for hours and read. And, so just myself, I've always been a big reader. I've tried so hard to instill a love of reading in my children. And I have libraries to thank for that. And then as a writer, I mean, I've been welcomed into so many libraries. And I just, I love libraries because there's, the books, but there's just this wonderful sense of community that I feel like you really can't find anywhere else, just all the programs that libraries offer, and just, that, I don't know, just everyone is welcome. And I love that. So I feel so grateful that I've been welcomed into all these libraries in person and now in this virtual space, which, I miss being able to see people face to face and all that. But I love that, here in this virtual space, I can chat with you tonight in Minnesota while I'm here in Chicago, and that we're still able to do all of this. So I'm so grateful to libraries for the impact that they've had on me and my family and my career.
Oh, Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Mary. Um, it's been an honor, and I've been so glad to welcome you into my library this evening. Um, so that's actually all we have time for. Thanks again, Mary, for penciling us into your busy October. It's been a wonderful conversation. I'm so grateful for your time.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me and for the fabulous questions, and to everyone who joined us tonight.
Yes. So this has been a virtual presentation of Club Book, a long-running literary series of MELSA made possible by the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. Special thanks again to Anoka County Library for the part they played in bringing Mary to us. Before you log off, look to the Club Book survey link, which is in the comments and will be projected in place of my video momentarily. Later, consider joining Club Book this Thursday for a talk with New York Times bestselling historical fiction writer Kate Quinn. This one will be co-hosted by Dakota County Library, and as always, it's free. They'll be right here on Facebook Live. Have a great night, everyone.